Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, I Like to Cake. Today I'll be showing you how to make my ultimate soft and chewy brownies. Just like the chocolate chip cookies, this is another one of my go-to recipes. It's pretty quick to throw together when you need a dessert last minute, and it doesn't take a lot of bowls, so I really love making this recipe and I hope you enjoy it too. Let's get started. The main equipment you'll need for this recipe is an 8-inch square baking pan. I'm using a metal one, but you can use a glass one as well. And then you'll need a small pot. And you heard me right, we are going to use a pot or a saucepan for this, not a bowl, because we actually cook some of it before we bake it in the oven. For this recipe, we're going to need half a cup of white sugar, 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 tablespoons of water, 1.5 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips, 2 eggs, half a teaspoon of vanilla, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit and then we'll get started. First we're going to prepare our baking pan, so grab some oil or you can use butter and just wipe it around so you have a very thin layer coating your entire pan. Once you've done that, you can leave it as is, or what I like to do is take some parchment paper and cut strips. You want the strips to be the same width as the pan, but a little bit longer so that it hangs over the edges. And this will give us a handle, and what the parchment paper does is it allows us to lift the brownies up out of the pan to cut them more easily and to serve them more easily when we're done. And of course it also helps to prevent the brownies from sticking to the pan. One little tip with the parchment paper to prevent those extra long edges from kind of getting in the way is to just fold it over the side of the pan and crease it. This way it won't fold in onto your batter while you're pouring it in or while it's baking. Now we're going to mix our dry ingredients, so take your flour, add in the 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and the 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and just stir that all together until it's well combined. Now we're going to move to the stove, so go ahead and place your pot or saucepan on the stove and turn the heat on to a medium heat. And then we're going to add the sugar, the water, and the butter. You can cut the butter into small pieces here to help it melt faster. We are going to boil this briefly, but you want all of the butter to be melted before we get to the boiling stage. If it looks like your butter may not be melting fast enough and the rest of it is going to start boiling, you can turn the heat down to continue melting the butter. So once the butter is all melted, continue to cook this until you see some bubbles starting to form. If it looks like it's heating kind of unevenly, you can just swirl the pot a little bit or stir it around like I am just to distribute it a little bit better. Okay, so now we have bubbles over the whole surface, but we want to let this continue to boil for about another 15 to 20 seconds. And then we can go ahead and turn the stove off. And then we're going to add in the chocolate chips and stir that around. Keep stirring until it's almost all melted. You'll probably still have a few little chunks or bits here and there, but that's okay. And it is important that the stove is off at this point because you don't want to burn the chocolate. Once the chocolate has been mixed in and it's pretty much all melted, we're going to add the eggs. Now you can add them one at a time or all together, but you want to work very quickly here because the mixture is still hot and it could start cooking the eggs. We definitely don't want to see scrambled eggs in our brownies, so make sure you stir very quickly. If you'd like, you can wait a few minutes before you stir in the eggs so that it cools down a bit, but if the chocolate starts to harden, it does get a little bit difficult to stir in the eggs, so I recommend not waiting too long. Once the eggs are mixed in evenly, we can go ahead and stir in the vanilla. Then we can add the dry ingredients that we mixed together earlier. And don't forget to scrape down the sides a little bit as you're working to try and incorporate all of that flour into your batter. And then that is our brownie batter. So let's take it back over to our prepared baking pan and pour it in. And then take your spatula or spoon and go ahead and kind of push it to the corners a little bit and smooth it out a little bit. You just want it to be even. You don't want a lot of batter in the middle and not much on the edges. So now we can put that in our preheated oven for 25 to 35 minutes, but I'm going to show you what I do to determine when it's ready. So first I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and I'll check on it. Usually at that point it looks like this. It's puffed up in the center. It might be kind of hard to see, but hopefully you can see that. And at this point you want to come back and look at it every 1 minute roughly, or you can do what I do and just sit in front of the oven and watch it until it's done. But what will happen is that center will start to fall. So once it has fallen completely, like you see here, it's done and we can take our brownies out of the oven to cool. Ideally, you want to let these cool completely. They're actually easiest to cut if you let it cool overnight and cut it the next day. But if you're like me, you don't have the patience and you just want to eat them, so let them cool down a little bit so that they're not piping hot, and then cut them. But it will be a little bit crumbly and it will probably stick to your knife a lot because they haven't cooled completely yet. So this is why I use the parchment paper. As you can see, it's really easy to just lift it straight out of the pan, and then we can place it on a cutting board to cut our pieces however big you like. And then you can place it back in the pan for easy storage. Just cover it with some foil and it's good to go. I've heard that a plastic knife is actually best for cutting brownies, but I didn't have one on hand, so what I did was I just wet my knife a little bit, and that helps prevent some of the brownies from sticking to the knife. But as you can see, I still had some of it sticking, so I just wiped that off and then re-wet the knife and went back in for the next cut. And there you have it. These are my ultimate soft and chewy brownies. If you make these, I would love to share your pictures in one of my next videos. You can email them to me at iliketocake.baker@gmail.com. Thanks for watching!